will Calvin be with you on this fight? Will Calvin be with you on this fight?
I don't know.
The relationship between Gervonta Tank Davis and his trainer, Calvin Ford, has always been one of deep connection and trust. From Davis's early days in boxing, Ford was more than just a coach. He was a father figure, guiding Davis through the challenges of his youth, which were marked by the harsh realities of Baltimore streets. Ford took Davis under his wing at a young age, offering him not only boxing lessons, but also the kind of mentorship and discipline that helped him stay away from trouble. For Davis, Ford was a second father, a constant in his life during tumultuous times. Calvin Ford, known for his own difficult upbringing, recognized the potential in Davis from the start. He didn't just see a talented fighter, but a young man who needed guidance to reach his full potential. Ford provided that, offering Davis a sanctuary in the Upton Boxing Center, which became a haven for at-risk youth looking for an escape from the streets. Ford often referred to Davis as his son, a sign of the strong familial bond they had developed over the years. For Davis, Ford wasn't just a coach, he was someone who had shaped his career and his life. However, despite this unshakable bond that had been formed over many years, recent events have suggested that their relationship might be facing strain. The public fallout began after Davis made a comment during a press conference about whether Ford would be in his corner for an upcoming fight. When asked, Davis simply responded with, "We'll see." This seemingly innocuous statement raised eyebrows and left fans and analysts questioning the state of Davis and Ford's relationship. To many, it seemed like Davis was leaving the door open for a future without Ford in his corner, a far cry from the unbreakable team they had once been. To many, this comment seemed to imply that Ford's involvement in Davis's future fights was uncertain, which was a stark contrast to the mutual respect and loyalty that had always defined their partnership. Ford had been there since the very beginning, helping Davis navigate a dangerous world while training him to become one of boxing's brightest stars. For years, their bond had been built on trust, respect, and a shared history. Ford was not only Davis's trainer, but also a mentor who helped him grow and evolve both inside and outside the ring. The public's reaction to Davis's comment was one of confusion and concern, especially given how integral Ford had been to Davis's rise to the top. In response, Kenny Ellis, a longtime friend and confidant to both Davis and Ford, sought to downplay the situation. Ellis, who had worked closely with both men for years, insisted that there was no real fallout between the two. According to Ellis, Davis's comment was likely a misunderstanding, as the bond between Davis and Ford was far deeper than just a professional relationship. It was a familial connection. He emphasized that Davis had no intention of being disrespectful, and that the comment had simply been a reaction to a question he wasn't prepared to answer. Despite Ellis's attempts to downplay the situation, it became clear that there were signs of strain between the two men. Ford's public reaction to Davis's comment revealed a level of hurt and confusion. Ford had been instrumental in Davis's rise, both as a coach and a father figure, and it seemed that Davis's words had struck a nerve. Ford had dedicated so much time and effort to Davis's success, and the suggestion that their relationship might not be as strong as it once was understandably difficult for him to process. But the tension between Davis and Ford didn't stem from just a single comment. The reality is that their relationship had been facing strain for some time, as Davis's career and personal life had begun to change. With his increasing fame and wealth, Davis found himself dealing with new pressures and challenges that could have made it difficult for him to maintain the same connections he once had. As a rising star in boxing, Davis's world had become more complicated, and it's possible that he began to reassess some of the relationships that had once been the foundation of his career. One of the most notable changes in Davis's life was his increasing association with new managers, promoters, and other figures in the boxing world. These new relationships and influences likely caused some friction with Ford, who had been with Davis from the very beginning. This shift in Davis's circle of support may have created a sense of distance between the fighter and his longtime mentor. Moreover, the pressures of being a top fighter in a high-profile sport like boxing are immense, and it's likely that these pressures contributed to the evolving dynamic between Davis and Ford. Ford, on the other hand, remained committed to the values that had guided him throughout his life, values like loyalty, dedication, and responsibility. These values had been instilled in him by his own experiences in the boxing world, and he believed in their importance not just for himself, but for the young fighters he mentored. For Ford, loyalty was paramount, and his belief in these values sometimes clashed with the evolving priorities of Davis, who was becoming more entrenched in the business side of the sport. Despite the apparent strain between them, both men had always viewed their relationship as something more than just a professional partnership. Ford had been there for Davis when he was a young boy, offering him a roof over his head and guidance in ways that went beyond boxing. As Davis's career took off, Ford had continued to serve as a grounding force, offering emotional support and discipline when it was needed most. Ford had watched Davis grow from a talented, troubled youth into one of boxing's brightest stars. For Ford, seeing Davis succeed was not just about the victories in the ring, it was about helping Davis navigate the difficult road of life. However, the complexities of Davis's rise to stardom began to test the limits of their relationship. Ford's recent comments indicated that he was hurt by the way things were unfolding. He had been with Davis every step of the way, and to see Davis move in new directions, perhaps leaving him behind, was understandably painful. Still, Ford had always been about loyalty in business. His statement that it's business was his way of signaling that despite the tension, their relationship would continue in some form. It just might not be the same as it had been before. The nature of their relationship had become even more complicated by the growing pressures within the sport of boxing. Davis was no longer just a talented fighter, he was a brand, a major figure in the sport with increasing expectations and a larger-than-life persona. As Davis moved further into the spotlight, he was forced to deal with the media, public scrutiny, and the pressures of maintaining his undefeated record. These new challenges could have played a role in his reassessment of his relationships, including his long-standing connection with Ford. Despite all of this, Calvin Ford continued to stand by the values he had always upheld. He remained committed to his fighters, believing that loyalty and hard work were the cornerstones of success. This commitment to values often put him at odds with Davis's evolving priorities, as Davis navigated the business side of boxing and the pressure of fame. But Ford remained steadfast in his belief that the bond between them was strong and enduring. In the face of growing tension, Ellis, the longtime friend of both Davis and Ford, worked to mediate the situation. He tried to reassure the public that the bond between Davis and Ford was stronger than any misunderstanding or miscommunication. Ellis believed that the relationship between the two men was rooted in years of shared experiences, and that no comment or controversy could tear it apart. However, even Ellis's optimism could not mask the fact that the situation had become more complicated. The dynamics between Davis and Ford had undeniably shifted. For boxing fans and those close to Davis's career, the situation was unsettling. Davis had always been viewed as a product of his environment, with Ford's guidance being instrumental in his success. To see their relationship fracture even partially raised questions about what the future held for Davis's career. Would he continue to rely on the lessons and support that Ford had given him, or would the pressures of his newfound fame and success drive him further away from the man who had helped shape him? The question of whether Davis would continue to work with Ford was not just about boxing, it was about the broader question of loyalty and growth. Davis had reached the pinnacle of his career, but he was still young and facing new challenges that required him to adapt. The outcome of his relationship with Ford would likely be influenced by how Davis chose to navigate these new challenges, and whether he would be able to balance his evolving personal and professional life with the values that Ford had instilled in him. As the situation continued to unfold, the world of boxing watched closely. The tension between Davis and Ford was a reminder of the complexities that come with fame, success, and the demands of a sport like boxing. Whether their bond would be able to survive these pressures remained to be seen, but for now, the relationship between Davis and Ford seemed to be in a state of flux. As boxing fans waited to see what would happen next, the question on everyone's mind was simple. Would Gervonta "Tank" Davis continue his rise to greatness with the same mentor who had been with him since the beginning, or would the pressures of fame push him in a new direction? Only time would tell.